Didi Gregorius has re-signed. What does this mean for the Phillies? Let's get into it on the state of the Philadelphia Phillies. What's going on, baseball fans? Jeremy Laracuente here for the Baseball Banter broadcast on the Laracuente Ledger Network. And as I said in the open, we're going to be discussing the re-signing of Didi Gregorius and what it means to the overall state of the Philadelphia Phillies. But before we do that, make sure you head over to LaracuenteLedger.com as we have an accompanying article on this very topic on the state of the Philadelphia Phillies. So I will leave links to that article down in the show notes below. So make sure you head over there and check it out. But let's begin with the re-signing of Didi Gregorius. Now, in my opinion, the 2-year, $28 million deal is on par with what you would expect given the deals that the shortstops this offseason have received. It's not quite as high as what Marcus Semien got from the Blue Jays, but it is a longer-term deal as it is a 2-year deal. Most of the other shortstops have only signed 1 year. We've covered Marcus Semien, Andrelton Simmons, and Freddie Galvis this offseason getting 1-year terms with new teams. Didi Gregorius going back to Philadelphia, to me, really helps this team, and we're going to get into more details in a moment. But what Didi does is he allows the Phillies offense and defense to just be better suited and better accommodated for not only that ballpark, but for the team within the division itself. Now, defensive metrics have never been a strong ally of Didi Gregorius, but the eye test would tell you that this is a plus defender. And having a plus defender in the infield, along with moving Jean Segura over to second base that allows his defense to be better, really does boost the team up the middle. When we previously covered the JT Realmuto signing, we said about having a strong middle up the field. And while they now have that, in my opinion, with JT behind the plate, Didi and Segura at short and second, they're still lacking a little bit in center field. But let's get into the state of the Philadelphia Phillies. Now let's start with the rotation. Yes, they have a top-tier 1-2 punch in Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler. Behind that, there's a lot of questions. Zach Eflin is likely going to have a spot in the rotation, but beyond that, there's a big gaping hole, in my opinion, on those final 2 spots. The Phillies do have some young arms that could potentially audition for that spot in spring training, but as you're looking at the competitive division that is the National League East, I think that the Phillies would be better served to go after another 2 starting pitchers, in my opinion. When you look at the division as a whole, and I've said it many times, I think this will be the most competitive division. But the Phillies are going to find themselves falling short and not being able to compete if they don't have starters to produce going into games. Relying on just 3 legitimate starting pitchers over the course of a 162-game season is just not a feasible plan of attack for success in 2021. Now, we've heard speculation and rumors about the Philadelphia Phillies not wanting to exceed the $210 million luxury tax threshold. Now, bringing back Gregorius, re-signing of JT Realmuto as well, approximately has the Phillies payroll at about $200 million. Now, if this is a hard line about not going over the $210 million salary cap, the Phillies are going to be hard-pressed to be able to put together a team that's going to be able to compete with the top of this division in the Braves, Nationals, and Mets. However, if that was just a negotiation tool to try to keep players' re-sign values down, and they're willing to exceed that $210 million luxury tax threshold, aka salary cap, then the Phillies will be in a much better position to go after a couple of starters and really solidify that rotation. Now, they can still have their young guys come up, make some impressive starts, run through a 6-man rotation for a bit of the season, as the 2020 shortened season really would hurt the ability for pitchers to kind of be stretched out long term as you would expect them to be. So running through a 6-man rotation for a little bit of time would really benefit a team like Philadelphia, but that is predicated on the fact of signing 2 more starting pitchers. Now, in our article on LaracuenteLedger.com, I make a suggestion on 2 potential starters the Phillies could look at. The first name that I mentioned is Jake Odorizzi. Odorizzi would kind of have a rebirth of sorts up in Minnesota. Now, yes, it's a much bigger ballpark that kind of helps him as he is a fly ball pitcher. And while going to Citizens Bank Park may leave a little bit to be desired from a fly ball pitcher, as that is a very hitter-friendly ballpark, there is still something to be said about the presence and the poise of this veteran starter. The other name that I mentioned in the article is James Paxton. Now, yes, Paxton is coming off of an injury-plagued season, and is perennially injury plagued. So this may not be the best move for the Philadelphia Phillies to make. However, if they were to sign him on the low, a low sign deal because he is trying to rebuild his value, a 1-year term, Paxton in my mind would be a great fit for Philadelphia. One, being a left-hander in that ballpark is a little better suited, but also because you're facing guys in that division like Juan Soto, Kyle Schwarber, Freddie Freeman, and so on. So I think that having a left-hander in that Philadelphia Phillies rotation that is all right-handed at this moment in time would really serve to better balance out the Philadelphia Phillies rotation. Now let's get into the state of the Philadelphia Phillies bullpen. When it comes to the Phillies bullpen, this is arguably and honestly their weakest spot in terms of their roster as a whole. Yes, they have a couple of good names that they've picked up this year. Jose Alvarado and Archie Bradley come to mind. But when you look at the rest of their bullpen, there's a lot of question marks there. Guys like Hector Neris, you never really know what you're getting anytime they step onto the mound. And the same goes for Sir Anthony Dominguez. Outside of those two names in the bullpen, you really don't have anything that stands out as a potential bullpen threat. This is something that the Philadelphia Phillies will need to shore up before the start of spring training and before the start of the regular season. Because without a good bullpen, there's no doubt that other teams are going to be able to run through your starters, work the count, get them out of the game to get to the weak bullpen. Shoring up the bullpen for the Philadelphia Phillies again becomes predicated on the fact of pushing past that $210 million luxury tax threshold. There may be potential opportunities to bring some guys in on minor league deals with major league contracts attached to them, but more than likely you're going to have to sign legitimate guys for legitimate dollars in order to make this Phillies bullpen a serious threat. Now, if the Phillies are resigned to staying under that $210 million luxury tax threshold, they're going to have to make serious decisions as to whether or not to attack the bullpen or to attack the starting rotation. You won't be able to do both if you don't exceed the $210 million limit. When you look at potential bullpen arms that could help the Philadelphia Phillies, I also named two in our article on LaDaQuintaLedger.com. Again, links down in the show notes below. Now, two names that I would mention are a righty-lefty combination of Jake McGee and Shane Green. Both of these guys are dominant relievers when they're going well. Yes, they are potentially injury risk with these two guys, but when they're going well, they can be really lights out pitchers in the back end of the bullpen. Again, it's all going to be based on what the Philadelphia Phillies decide to do about the $210 million luxury tax threshold limit. If they're willing to push past, go after both Jake McGee, Shane Green, as well as Odorizzi and Paxton, and now you really push the Phillies to the top of the National League East, in my opinion. When you look at the team that they have on the field, Bryce Harper, Rhys Hoskins, JT Realmuto, Didi Gregorius, Gene Segura, Andrew McCutchen. Then you add in a pitching staff of Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler, James Paxton, Jake Odorizzi, and Zach Eflin. And then you have a lockdown bullpen that's manned by Archie Bradley, Jake McGee, Shane Green, and Jose Alvarado. Now you have the makings of a serious threat in the National League East. Now, let's get into the state of the Philadelphia Phillies offense. Offensively speaking, I think this team is very well rounded and has the potential to be one of the better offenses, especially in the National League East. When you look at the balance that's provided by Bryce Harper, Rhys Hoskins, JT Realmuto, they all bring something a little bit different. Then you also add in the fact of a dynamic young third baseman in Alec Bohm. This team has the potential to do some very good things, in my opinion. When you look at the fact of re-signing Gregorius, moving Segura to second base, it now frees up Scott Kingery to play more of a Ben Zobrist utility type role. But the biggest hole for the Philadelphia Phillies to me is in center field. When you look at what center field is for this Philadelphia Phillies, it's going to be a platoon at this point. Guys like Roman Quinn, Adam Hazley, among others, are likely going to be competing for that spot. And without someone taking over the everyday role for center field for the Phillies, I think that that's going to be a spot of weakness for the Phillies lineup. If they were to bring in a center fielder of legitimate value, i.e. a Jackie Bradley Jr. or a Kevin Pillar, someone of that nature, that would give the Phillies a more well-rounded and balanced team. Preferably Jackie Bradley Jr., as that center field spot in Philadelphia is kind of expansive when you really look at it. And given the fact that Andrew McCutchen is on the left side, who's aging and not having the same amount of range as he used to, and Bryce Harper is on the right side, who defensive metrics don't really favor him, despite the fact that I think he is a very good defender. You now put Jackie Bradley Jr. in that center field spot, and you really get a much more upgraded defensive team. Now, Jackie Bradley is not going to provide you the offense of some of the other names that are potentially on the free agent market in terms of outfield help, but most of those guys are more so corner outfield types. But if you lock down the defensive side of the ball with a guy like Jackie Bradley Jr., the rest of the team can bring the offense. So closing out these thoughts here, I think that when you look at what the Philadelphia Phillies are at this moment, they're going to be towards the back end of the division, competing with the Marlins for last place. But with a couple of moves and spending a little bit more money, the Philadelphia Phillies could very easily find themselves competing at the top of the division against teams like the Braves, Mets, and Nats. Ultimately, the National League East, in my opinion, will be the most competitive division, and despite the shortcomings currently presented by the Philadelphia Phillies roster, I think that they have the potential to surprise people in that division and in the National League as a whole. But I want to hear from you guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. As always, if you have not done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well as that bell to stay notified of every time we drop new content here on the La Cuenta Ledger Network and on the Baseball Banter broadcast. The only way to do that is by hitting that subscribe and the bell to be alerted every time we drop content here. There's going to be a lot more things coming from us here on the La Cuenta Ledger Network in 2021, so make sure you keep it locked in. And to get the full La Cuenta Ledger Network experience, make sure you head over to patreon.com, search for the La Cuenta Ledger Network, and join us as well, as there's a ton of exclusive content already on our Patreon account and more incoming. So make sure you keep it locked in for the full La Cuenta Ledger Network experience, and I will catch you guys when the latest news, notes, and my personal thought, theories, and opinions have to be dropped about the game of Major League Baseball. Peace.